So you wanna pick someone from the top of the tier list, but hold the fuck on, young man! Because your pick can lose you a game and make the whole match unbearable, while making you ask yourself, what went wrong here? Even if it's supposed to be a top tier champion by someone's opinion, you don't just automatically assume that this pick is gonna work here. And that's why I want to share with you my top... I don't know how many of them are actually here, because I was adding them to the script for way too long. So here are picks that more often than not will ruin you a game. And just to clarify, I don't hate these champions. These champions are just unable to adapt to the situation. If something goes not exactly the way these champs want, that's it, you lost. So let's get started on triggering the absolute shit out of people. First of all, Maldamba. Some people say that it doesn't matter who you prioritize, Genos or Damba. They are both top tier, right? Well, guess what? Nope, that's not the case. Not at all. Not even fucking close. Usually people's argumentation of Snake being one of the best is that on average he can output a big number in the healing department. However, as I say like every time that I talk about supports, healing is only half the job. You also need to be able to stay alive. You need to be able to run away from a flanker or to kill a flanker, which Genos, for example, definitely can do. Also, you need to use your gun and add some damage to the fight when needed. And sometimes even to flank and take down an enemy damage champion by yourself. As a support, yes, Snake is extremely slow and immobile. Not only he doesn't have any vertical mobility, but even his horizontal mobility sucks. Every other support is basically flash compared to Snake. His weapon is also terrible. It's only effective at close range, because you won't be able to hit your shots consistently even at mid-range. His survivability, damage, mobility, all of it almost non-existent. All of above leads to the point that on open maps, on vertical maps, and on maps with a long line of sight, like Timber Mill, Snake becomes a burden to the team. But hey, he has a lot of healing and stuns every second. Yeah, these two things could be strong factors. On tournaments, where your entire team is full of pro players that know what they are doing. Not in our regular competitive matches. You can win by standing behind and healing only if you are getting carried. From my experience, I just can't expect anyone to carry me. If I don't make plays, then nobody will. And Maldamba, unfortunately, is not geared towards making these plays often enough. Sky. Initially I didn't want to put her here, but then I saw that some pro players put Sky very high in the tier list, even above Xin, which makes absolutely no sense. She's still terrible. She still has the worst kit among flankers. Her smoke still works like shit. She can't deal damage at distance. She doesn't have a reliable way to retreat. She doesn't have any mobility at all. There is exactly one situation when she can be good. And I'm not talking about dancing striptease or bringing you beer while invisible so she won't obscure your TV with your body. I'm talking about countering streaks. She's pretty good at it. Her invisibility allows her to pass through all the obstacles unnoticed by streaks with his overpowered flare gun that doesn't allow anyone to get close to him. Except Sky, of course. That's it. This is the only scenario that she can be good at. If you pick Sky while an enemy team doesn't have streaks, the odds are not in your favor. Maeve, the highest tier champ according to some pro players, but no, she isn't that good. At her full potential in a good team that will play around you, while you also are skilled and experienced enough to take the absolute maximum out of this champion, she can be pretty strong. Not stronger than Andro or Xin or Eevee, but still pretty strong. However, all of these conditions, it's not what's gonna happen in our regular competitive match. She has a very high skill floor. Even though her projectiles fly faster now, you still need a lot of skill to land these shots consistently. You need a perfect game sense to know when to flank, when to poke and when to retreat. And even if you have it, Even if you are really good at playing Mave, if your team won't make plays to swing a fight in your favor, if they won't break through chokes, if they won't stall when needed, as Mave you won't be able to do shit. She can work great in a great team, she can turn a slight advantage in a fight into a team wipe, but creating that advantage is not something that she excels at. She's great as a follow-up champion, not a leading one. Also, she's not a good counter to Drogoz. Stop picking her against Drogoz, fuck's sake. Next, Barik. Oh boy, the dislikes are gonna rain. Just like this is not a girl, this is not a tank. He is presumably one of the easiest champions to play. You might not even need to shoot to deal damage. And in the end of the match you can point at your damage stat and say, my team was full of noobs, since you got most damage. This is a trap for new players. That's why you can see a lot of players pick Barik all the time in every game on any map and against whoever. Unfortunately, having the potential to get the highest damage isn't making Barik a good pick. And there are a whole bunch of reasons for that. First, he has a very low HP pool. Other tanks can overwhelm him with their massive 5000 plus HP pools. He just can't trade shots with other tanks, which already means that he is indeed inferior to any other frontliner. More than that, he can't even trade shots with flankers, with a class that he's supposed to counter. Usually turrets in games counter flankers like NG counters Scout and TF2. Barik doesn't counter shit. His utility is the lowest among all the frontliners. He doesn't have crowd control like Makoa and Inara. His ult is just an additional shield plus turret. It gets countered by almost anything. But most of all, what makes Barik so easy to counter is his awful and almost useless shield. It's a stationary and a huge target that becomes useless as soon as an enemy damage champion gets Wrecker level 2. Which is exactly after the first capture point. From that moment of the match, Barik basically has one ability less, and without that shield, Barik is just a small man with a small gun. And even without Wrecker, you can't use this shield to engage targets, like Ashe does. You can't use this shield to disengage, like Fernando. You can't turn it around and beat off a shot. This shield is so weak that gets countered by a whole bunch of champions and abilities. Drogoz destroys the whole playstyle that Barik is trying to pull off. Willow can throw her seedling above the shield and make it fall slightly behind it, which negates the whole point of having a shield in first place. And I'm not even talking about how OP Scorched or Legendary is against Barik. Hell! Even Victor with his grenades can destroy Barik for the same reason. And don't even let me start it on players that pick Barik against Xin. That's just no. And since the only thing he's kinda good at is damage, let's talk about that too. Barik also has a pretty bad weapon by default, and he needs to get a specific legendary to make it into Makoa's weapon. What a great deal, right? His main source of damage are turrets, but they aren't chasing anyone, they can't kill an enemy that isn't just ignoring them. They just pick a random target and shoot at it, and Barik has no control over it. So while they do add a lot to his damage stat, all of that damage is almost useless because it's just a trash damage. If you have dealt damage but didn't finish the target, or killed the target that was unimportant at that moment, instead of doing things that you are supposed to do, you can wipe your ass with that high damage stat. It's absolutely worthless. Also, Barik can only play with one playstyle: defensive. He gets on the point, he puts his shit down and tries to zone everyone out. That's it. He is the least flexible champion in the game. He can't actually flank like others, he can't retake the objective if he gets killed or zoned out before he gets on the point. He can't rush like Fernando or Inara. He can't bully the backline. Just one playstyle which is borderline terrible. The only reason people pick him is that they can point at their high damage stat while blaming the team for the defeat. And defeat is indeed what you get for picking Barik in comp. The next bad pick is Androxus. My face when Andro is in the top bad picks. One of my favorite champions. However, we have to admit that more often than not, picking Androxus will result in a defeat. Why is that? How did one of the top flankers become a bad pick? That's simple, just like Barik, he is very limited in the playstyle choice. Now, comparing two flankers that are actually viable at the moment, which are Eevee, Xin, you know. Eevee can flank, but she can also stay in the back and use your weapon like Drogoz or Willowwood, contributing to a team's damage. She can destroy shields just like damage champions. She can hunt other flankers down with her infinite mobility and take high grounds, which won't allow the enemy team to move freely. Xin can flank, but he can also kill tanks, force people off the point and break through chokes with his counter. And what can Androxus do? He can flank and he can flank. That's pretty much it. His poke is terrible. In order to deal damage, he needs to be up close, which means out of position. He is the all-in type of guy. One small mistake, or enemies will just try to take you down before engaging, or your team won't actually attack when you attack, and you are screwed. Once in a while Androxus can get some big reversals and one-shot somebody, or to get some sneaky flank and kill isolated target, but it's not enough of an impact to carry a game. In a good team, yeah, he can take the momentum that the team creates and turn it into even more momentum, but he is not really geared towards creating that momentum by himself. That's why, more often than not, Androxus is not a good pick, even after the buff. Next picks that can ruin your game are 4 similar champions: Bumpkin, Peep, Drogoz and Willow, but Bumpkin more than the others because he's really hard to play. These blaster champions can be very strong, and some of them are mostly banned or picked all the time. The problem with them is that they are very map dependent. All of them really shine on maps with a lot of nice high grounds and where the point is not surrounded by walls. So Stone Keep is perfect for them. They can take the high ground above the point and rain down all their damage, stuns and so on. However, not every map fits these requirements. For example, Bright Marsh. The point is surrounded by a wall, so you can't really throw all of your explosive stuff on the point that easily. More than that, there are not that many high grounds that you can utilize, which is a big deal for champions that are dependent on having a high ground. These blaster champions have weapons that are really strong but only work when shooting from above. No high grounds, weapons become ineffective. But not only map can screw these guys over. Enemy champions that can outshoot them at long distance can definitely spoil your day. Shalin, Cassie, Lian, Victor and even snipers. All of them can destroy these plus champions. And if not kill, then at least to outpoke and use suppressive fire in order to not let them shoot. If you can't shoot and you can't take the enemy damage champions down by yourself when needed, then as for me, I wouldn't call these champions as top tier picks that work all the time and everywhere. Also, they are pretty shitty when it comes to fight each other. So picking Bumpkin or Peep or Willow against Drogoz is really fucking dumb. Stop that. Picking them blindly will mostly result in a defeat. And our last spot in the list of worst picks for competitive: snipers, Kinessa and Strix. Statistically speaking, they got the lowest win rate of all the champions, even lower than Sky, much lower actually. If all the rest of champions have about a 50% win rate, snipers have 30 to 40% on all the maps with the exception of Timbermill, where they got about 45. As you probably already know, snipers are very situational. They can only work in a few situations and on just couple maps, primarily Timbermill. Their main problem is, just like all the rest of champions in this list, they can't adapt to the situation. They are very one-sided. They can only do one thing and one thing only: kill people at long range. If somebody comes close, then even Strix with his overtuned pistol is still at disadvantage. Unlike all the rest of damage champions, especially top tier Shalin and Cassie. Snipers only have one possible playstyle. They can't stand on the point even if the enemy team is zoned out, because then they become way too easy of a target, and they don't have angles that snipers need. They also can't flank when needed, unlike, again, Shalin, Cassie, Victor and so on. snipers can't play the objective, which means that you put more work on your teammates if you pick a sniper. Snipers only work if the enemy team plays way too passive, allowing you to shoot their heads off, or when your team carries you, which is not how the game works, at least for me. That's why picking sniper more often than not will end up in a defeat. So if you wanna climb in the competitive, rethink your picking strategy. You gotta pick not just a strong champion, and not a champ that some pro player just threw somewhere high in his ridiculous tier list. You gotta pick someone who fits the situation and can adapt. See ya!